Good afternoon, actually, good afternoon or good morning, depending on your time zone. This is Dr. Brent Turvey, and I'm here again with my forensic investigator colleague, Melanie Inglis. And this is episode 13 of The Hard Truth. Good morning, good morning, good afternoon, Melanie. Good morning, good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock for you, right?
It is 1:03, yes.
All right, good. It's a little earlier for me. So this week, we had some other things we were going to talk about, but as often happens, Aurelio and I watched a documentary this weekend on HBO, the new documentary called Undercurrent. It's about the femicide, the sexual homicide of a female journalist by a Danish tech tech personnel. We'll call me a Danish tech personality, and the documentary is amazing for a lot of different reasons. And I watched it, and then I had to watch it again immediately afterwards because I couldn't believe what I'd seen. And it's for all the wrong reasons. And after Aurelio and I watched it again, the question was this made as does somebody realize what they've done? Or is this something that the filmmakers planned? Because this documentary represents an anthropological moment in time. You could do your PhD on this documentary. It is so good. I wanted to get, and Melanie, I just want to make this very clear to everyone. You and I have not talked about this yet, right?
No.
We have had no discussion. You've watched it, but we've not talked, correct?
That's right.
That's because what I want is to preserve your thoughts. I want you to talk to me about your thoughts after you watch this. Because I said, you got to watch it and we're going to talk about it. And I want to know what you think, because I want to preserve your insights, your impression. So please talk to me. Just give me some thoughts.
I'm not really sure you're going to like my thoughts on this documentary, but we'll start there.
It's not about that.
You built it up quite well, and I was looking forward to watching it and seeing all this detail and these different forms of evidence that may lead you to suggest certain things that you suggested, but those did not exist. So I thought that it was done well. There wasn't as much information as I was hoping to see, because it was there were bits of information, like they would reference a sexual assault or they would reference a beating, but there was nothing else that's like no evidence, no anything to suggest that, I don't even know where that came from, right? So I don't have the documentation in front of me. So there were little bits of information. And then, of course, what he did to her after the fact when she was dead. That was obvious because they were showing pictures of that, but I don't know. I think it was done well, but I wanted more. There was more information. I was missing information. I wanted more.
Okay. I totally get it. And what I like about what your take is you're watching it, trying to learn about the case. You want the facts and the evidence and the details. That's the way your brain works, right? I mean, you're very much about, let's get the facts. Let's find out what the evidence says. Let's hear about the reports. You know what I mean?
Well, imagine I did my job like that. Like, if I just watched something like that and didn't ask any questions, like, oh, they said that this happened, that must have happened. Right. So I'm now used to looking at it through a different lens.
That's exactly right. Any other, tell me about what you were thinking as you were watching it, about the context and about the people that were involved.
You mean him and her, or everyone?
Forget him and her. They're the sideshow. The real interesting part for me is everyone else and their way of looking at it, their impressions, their journey, shall we call it?
Everyone else's journey through this crime, like the journalists and things like that, the other ones? Is that who you're referring to?
I'm referring to like you have the journalist who covered it. You have there's a number. Every single person in this documentary believes this documentary is about themselves.
That's right. There was
the prime character in this documentary, and they speak only in terms of how it affects them.
That's right. That person that you just showed, there was a couple of the friends of the victims that were constantly talking. They made it about themselves. They were talking about how it affected them and how they felt, and not really focusing. They would mention once in a while that they wished they were talking more about the victim, because it was a lot about the offender, which is what we talk about all the time. Everybody gets so obsessed with what did they do? How did they do it? We want to talk about the offender. We don't care about the victim. You know, that's irrelevant at this point. It doesn't sell documentaries or novels if you're just focusing on that, right?
That's right. So this documentary is aware of itself in a way. What it does is it tells the story. The first part is about the way that things went down. They do a good job of spending about 15 minutes explaining who this victim is, Kim Wall, and that she's a journalist and that she's young and white and attractive. And this is the reason why we're having a documentary about her. But it gets worse than that. She is the central. They're aware of the fact as they're talking about this story that the focus is on the offender. Now that's the first thing we encounter. This documentary has every single stereotype, every trope, every single wrong notion of how to look at true crime, how to look at victims, how to look at violence, and how the people involved make themselves the protagonist and make the violence and the victim invisible. So we start out with a background about her, because the filmmakers are quite aware that they're going to spend a lot of time talking about how weird this guy is. That's the nature of criminology, and even criminal psychology and even forensic psychology is to turn these situations into a clinical problem. They approach it in terms of psychopathology. They want to make the problem be one of these are all good people. The narrative is this: these are all good people living in Denmark. They're all nice. They're all white. They're all well off. And this country doesn't have these problems. This country doesn't have these issues. This country doesn't have violence against women. This country does not have femicide. This country does not have gender violence. That's the message that every single person who's talking is trying to sell you, while at the same time acknowledging that this young lady was abducted, raped, tortured, and murdered right in front of the whole nation. And no one was willing to see it, even as the story was unfolding. They were absolutely resistant to the notion. And that's the first problem. The second problem is, of course, that the problem is the way that we criminologists and psychologists, the way we talk about crime is we focus on the offender, and this makes the victims and their reality invisible. And we try to make it more about the problems that they have and why maybe it's their fault. I swear to God, I expected them to start asking, wonder what she was wearing when she got on the submarine that made him do that. I could feel that conversation like waiting to happen, but
I'm surprised that it didn't.
Yeah, I was very surprised.
I was waiting for it to take a little bit of a turn, honestly, in that direction, saying like, was she leading him on? What were their conversations beforehand? What could she have done to anger this person? Because they were talking about his temper. They mentioned that he has a temper a few times, but they never expected that he could do something like this. He's so wealthy. He's so charismatic, all of these things. Like, what could she have done? I definitely thought it was going to go in that direction.
Well, that's a really good point. And also, you just hit on something very important. They kept describing him as handsome, as the mad professor, the mad scientist. They kept describing him in very stereotypical ways that we understand insanity, but only through the lens of wealth and privilege. They kept saying over and over again, you look at the guy, he looks like, if you take his face, he looks like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. He's not an attractive person necessarily. The reason that they're saying he's charismatic, no, what you mean is he's wealthy and privileged. And people like being around him because they thought his wealth and privilege would rub off on them. There was no other reason that people were tolerating his bullshit. He was married.
Side note,
the relationship was open, and he was a swinger. He was doing all kinds of stuff with different girls, trying to seduce them into sex. The only reason they're putting up with him is because he's wealthy. There's no other reason that I could tell. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, side note, through the whole thing, I think they compared him to Elon Musk how many times, and I kept thinking, I wonder what Elon Musk thinks about this.
Yeah, I don't think this guy's an Elon Musk. This guy's like a person making bottle rockets in his backyard out of material that's not proper for the stuff. He understood basic engineering design, but he didn't know how to make stuff that would actually be. Elon Musk is I mean, we got to admit, even though he's an asshole, he's a narcissist, he's not a good human being. He is very smart. He's just a very smart person with a lot of money. And he's, his ability, he understands that when you make a certain kind of craft, you have to make it out of a certain kind of material in a certain way so it can serve a certain function. Elon Musk understands it. This guy just likes rockets because they're fiery and burn and make him look cool. The most interesting observation about him was that he was like a child, basically. If you took the attention off him, he would get angry and he would get more violent and ramp it up. Why would you tolerate that from anyone? And it's only one thing, only money. Only thing that makes him, people tolerate his nonsense was money. The only reason they were getting on the boat with him was because he was this quirky guy with a lot of money. This narrative is very obvious through the whole thing, and they try to disguise it by suggesting that, well, he just could convince anyone of anything. No, you can't. You can only do that if you're talking crazy and have money. If you're just talking crazy on the street corner, you won't do it.
No,
sorry, go ahead.
And it was referenced at the end when they were playing the prison phone calls. He would say things like that, and it was ignored the entire time. He was saying, well, I was angry. That's why I did it. Don't make me angry. Yeah. People just bypass that. And they're like, but he's got a genius mind.
Yeah, they kept calling him some kind of evil genius. He's not that smart. Yeah. What he did was he eventually decided over his life that he was going to do this. He started soliciting different people who were all vulnerable. He was targeting women who were vulnerable on purpose, and then created a space in the water where he could bring someone and trap them. Basically a dungeon in the water. And using the novelty of a submarine and his wealth as a lure. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about him. Otherwise, no one would get on that boat with him by themselves at all.
No, and he referenced it years before, sort of, when he posted about it. Do you remember that, when he was talking about crossing over the border from heaven to hell, and he wants to live in hell, and once you get to hell, then you have to live hell. That's what he kept saying. And he was referencing it and then starting to watch all these videos. So there was a buildup of that happening, but nobody was paying attention. Like you said, the money took over everything.
That's exactly right. No one was paying attention to him at all. They were only interested in being around him because of his wealth and his privilege. The privileges that wealth gave him. He was allowed to get away with a lot of things because of his wealth and privilege. But let's back up and stop talking about him, because he's his own character. I want to talk about how this documentary did such a great job anthropologically of really capturing a moment in time in where you're having this country. You're seeing how it sees itself, how it sees crime, how it sees its citizens, and how it sees the rest of the world. First thing I want you to respond to is this. And this, as far as I could tell while I was watching this documentary, the people from Denmark who were interviewed, I mean, these are all a bunch of very privileged white people living in this country that they're talking to. And they're talking as though violence in the rest of the world does not exist, or the rest of the world is black and evil. And this is some sort of special Eden where this kind of thing never happens and never could happen in this total country. Did you get that? Did you get that vibe coming off these people?
Yeah. When they were talking about her and her career, they were often referencing the places that she would go. They would name the country or the towns or all these places that she would go. And they would say, they're so dangerous. And if she was going to get killed, that would have been the place, not here where there's nothing.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And they kept referencing all of these other places all over the world as bad and dangerous. And that's where it should have happened. Not here, because we don't have that here. That's what they kept referring to all the time.
Exactly. They kept talking about other countries, and they even said that, like, other shithole countries, other places that are not Denmark, other places that are where, and when they would show an image, it would be her with some black or brown people. Like, she went to way more dangerous places, bad areas, bad streets, bad this, bad that. And it's, to me, what that did was it demonstrated that this particular community of actors in Denmark are drawn from the cast of society that does not see violence as a reality. They don't see the violence that's in front of them. They don't understand that it's around them. And they believe wrongly that there is no gender violence problem in Denmark. They believe there is no homicide like this in Denmark, that there's no problem like this. No. And they believe that if you have these things occurring, they should be coming from other people, other sources, other places that are more dangerous, anywhere that's not Denmark, essentially. But what they really mean is anywhere where there are, black, Asian, or Mexican, or brown people. It was very, they use those words over and over again. All bad things are described in terms of evil, dark, black, and they're all externalized to people from other countries. So the only way to accept that it has happened in their country is to try to describe it in terms of psychopathology. It can't be a normal person who did this. It can only be somebody with an extreme mental illness. Talk to me about that. Did you get that vibe as well, or?
I did. I was going to mention also they asked two of the other females that were being interviewed throughout both of the series, that was 1 and 2. They asked them if they would have done her jobs, like go to these other countries, these dangerous, and they were like, well, you know, it is the job, but she was always willing to go to the dangerous places. And then they said, but would you have went in the submarine? And they said, yep, no questions asked. So they don't even believe, like they honestly believe that that does not and could not exist in that space, in their town, in their place, but everywhere else they would be skeptical, but not in their own. But they both said it. They don't even believe it.
The information they have today, right? Even with the information they have right now in front of them, with the brutal murder, torture, rape, killing, and dismemberment of their colleague, which is right in front of their faces, they're saying, "Yeah, I'd get on the boat." All of them.
Yeah.
They want to do it because that's the job, and they still cling to the notion that the danger is external. The danger is other cultures. The danger is other places. It's not here. So of course we would. It's a complete denial, a complete invisibility of the danger that's right in front of them. Because what they're saying is the men's violence against women does not exist in Denmark. This is impossible. And it is a problem with the country of Denmark. Denmark has a problem addressing its own gender issues. That's been known for a long time. Denmark has a huge problem with racism. That's been known for a long time. And it's Scandinavia in general. There's just a lot of racism there. If you've ever met someone from Scandinavia, you were never wondering, gee, I wonder if this person's from Scandinavia. No, within the first 2 minutes, they're going to tell you, they're like an American. They'll tell you who they are, where they're from, and how their country's better than any other country on the planet. They do not hesitate to talk to you in those terms, very condescending and very racist terms, and how terrible other countries are. So they have this belief in that's sort of secured thoroughly to their identity about how safe their country is, how exceptional their country is, their countries are, and how this kind of thing does not happen there. So the only way to describe it is not in terms of, men are violent and men harm women all the time in different ways. No. This is a crazy person. That's the only way this can work.
And they tried that angle. They did ask a bunch of ex-sexual partners, because as you mentioned, they had an open relationship. So he had a bunch of sexual partners. They asked a lot of females, and they all came back saying, no, you know, he was really gentle and caring. And everybody came back with that sort of idea. And that quickly got pushed to the side because they were not confirming what they wanted them to confirm either.
Yeah, they weren't confirming his pathology. The psychopathology they were trying to ascribe to him did not exist. It was not like that. And then what happened is, to get attention, he morphed into what they wanted him to be started using the language. Because at first, I mean, truly in the way of a psychopath, let's not be unclear about this. He absolutely originally is I'm the stargazing poet inventor. You know, I'm the modern day Galileo or something like that, or the modern day, you know, what
they even showed that when they asked him what he was going to do, and he glanced up at the stars.
He sees himself as Da Vinci, as sort of an inventor, poet, philosopher. But then once he stops getting rewarded for that and that identity disappears, he slips into another skin of the crazy man to keep and get attention, and starts writing people and giving interviews and blogging and all that stuff. So to me, it's just that's the obvious part. But what they do in this conversation, these women who are clearly traumatized, and they clearly have a truth that they're seeing right in front of their eyes. But because of their narrative, they're not allowed to talk about it. They're not allowed to, they can't see it. They cannot see the gender violence. They can't see the gender discrimination. They can't see the structural violence. And they are talking. You could see they're almost crying, talking about how great things are because they're so damaged. But there is one character who rises above it all, who speaks the plain truth every single time, who, to my mind, is the redemption of Denmark in my perspective. And that is essentially this transgendered ex-naval officer who is understands submarines, understands the physics, understands the engineering, and immediately identifies the problem, speaks it clearly and plainly, but also has no problem whatsoever appreciating the gender perspective and gender violence, because they're a victim of it every day. They experience it directly every day. And that is this person. She is amazing. And she really adds the only sort of rational, logical perspective in the whole documentary, because she sees the problem, she sees the violence, she sees the lies, and she's intolerant of it. And the rest of the people seem very eager. They're telling you, we're eager to find a way to make him be telling the truth about not having done this, because we need to have that. We need that. If he changes his story, right? Like 4 or 5 times.
Oh yeah.
And then eventually, and they're telling us, yeah, every time he changes his story, he's allowed to do that. Now we have to find a way to find that not true, or else it might be true. They're not even willing to entertain how terrible things are, even when they're looking right at him.
No.
She right here, she's amazing. She immediately just like, this is bullshit. It's intolerant. He's lying.
Every time.
We need to arrest him and we need to prosecute him. Tell me your thoughts.
I love this person so much. Every time they would cut to her, they would be changing the story, right? And they'd come back and she'd be like, no, because of these reasons. And I understand this. This is not even possible. How are you even believing this? I loved how she called everything out. The only one to see everything for how it was, if you ask me.
Yeah, even the first is remember the search and rescue guys from the military, the guy who's from there, he's just like, we don't look at it as people. We just look at these as things that we're collecting, and emotionally.
Take your emotions out.
First, admitting that they don't do this all the time, that this is a very rare event, and the bodies in the currents and bodies in the water almost never happen. And then in the very same breath saying, well, if I had to think about all the times I'd done this, then I would, have nightmares all the time.
I wouldn't.
Which is it? Is it rare, or do you have it all the time? Which is it?
Also, what I would like to, I caught on to that immediately, because there was so many, they were searching for so many days. It's like, I forget. I think it was approaching 50 some odd days. And not once had they talked about getting an expert in to monitor the current of that body of water. And I was like, why haven't you asked anybody? You're searching for a needle in a haystack, but bring in an expert. And then finally they were like, oh, somebody said that we should check the current. If you didn't know that from the beginning, I'm afraid for all the people, or lack thereof, I think you're right. I don't think they've done it, because that would be the first thing that you should be assessing in that sort of situation.
Yeah, and that's a reminder that, here we go. Who is Ditte Dierenborg, the naval commander who helped convict Kim Wall's arrest? She, amazing person. If anyone's interested, if you really want to see someone who is understanding the gender perspective, who understands basic logic and critical thinking in these investigations, who speaks plainly about them, such a great person to reference. Such a great addition to this documentary. And the only person in the documentary who I can see is seeing the truth and telling the truth, seeing the violence, seeing the discrepancies, and speaking up. And by the way, without this person, without her, this case would not have the guy would not even have been stopped at the docks. He had blood on his face when they stopped him. And they were still wondering if they should stop him. He was saying,
I agree. I think that would have been it. He would have left and he would have said, I don't know, I dropped her off. She went missing after I dropped her off. And I think that would have been the end of the investigation if it weren't for this person right here.
Yeah, if Ditte had not been involved, it would have been a very different outcome. Yeah. So we have the females are denying what's right in front of them in terms of the violence against women, and in terms of their own sort of perspective of the world. They're being shown how their perspective of the world is completely wrong, completely backwards, and they are still willingly, blindly saying they would get into the submarine to be killed. Even with what they know now, they do it again.
There was even text messages that he was sending to some of these women talking about going into this submarine and committing a murder. He was talking about killing someone in it, and they're just like, whoa, he sounds crazy today. And that was it.
What they're acting, I wonder if this is a plan. I wonder if he's a violent person with a violent whatever. I wonder. Wow. It's really interesting. No, it's not. This is a guy telling you what he's going to do and then doing it, and you wondering if he's done it.
Yeah.
While you're watching him do it.
Precisely.
It's very frustrating. And I'm laughing because I'm frustrated, not because I think it's funny.
Oh, no, it was frustrating. The whole thing was frustrating, right? As soon as the water current thing started, I was like, okay, where are we going from here? Because this is
So the next, we have the denial of male violence by everyone, and the gender violence in general. And then we have the denial of the trauma of of the female community in Denmark and them being forced to repress their own trauma while being interviewed about it, which is just another level of violence and denial against these poor people. It's awful. And then finally, they come back to the question of, well, is he a serial killer? Because that would make it even worse. And the question gets asked to the police, like, well, this is my personal opinion, but I don't think you start out like this. Well, of course not, but that's the right answer. But the right question is, where does it come from? Does it come from the person who's got all the wealth and privilege, or does it come from society that allows people with wealth and privilege to do shit that they shouldn't be allowed to do? This is the question. How did you feel about that when they were talking about him being a serial killer?
Well, my initial reaction was that it's a pretty big jump to go from not committing any sort of violent act to dismembering somebody. That was my first thought. But then I was intrigued, and I'm very interested to see what they do going forward, because they said they were going to look into these other missing girls that have been missing for quite some time. But I want to see if that actually goes forward, because they're trying to link him to these other girls. So they've stated, right? So I'm interested to see where that goes, because the cop, it was very vague when they asked him. He's like, well, probably he could have.
The reality is, though, that they acknowledge they have a bunch of unsolved femicides.
Right.
There.
Yes.
Right. But the way that they're talking about it lets you know right away that if they had a femicide that was staged to look like a suicide or a missing persons case, they would not be on top of it at all. They would have no idea what they were looking at. Do you know what I mean? That to me is very scary for me, because all I was thinking is these people are so inexperienced, so unknowledgeable, and in such denial about the violence in their community that they're talking about but denying it is existing, that they would not see it if it were right in front of them. So there's no understanding or perception of the domestic violence. There's no understanding and perspective on rape. There's no understanding and perspective on what actually constitutes a femicide and the context that creates that. And this is an extreme context where this kind of thing becomes possible, because they don't have how do I put this? This country, the people in this country have deprived themselves of the language to even describe the problem, let alone see it. They lack the language to see how bad things are. They lack the ability to describe it. And so now we're seeing the consequence of that. And we're not even, the people who are there are still accepting it. Like, oh yeah, I guess this happens as a one-up. They're trying to make it, he's crazy. He's not like the rest of us. The rest of us are never like this, and we never see it. We never see this kind of thing. How did you feel watching on that issue? How did you feel about that? Because I feel like the way they were approaching it just silenced a lot of perspectives, and they were holding their own stuff in.
Yeah, I don't know, like you said, they're trying to pin it on like this one event that happens to almost like reassure themselves that it is only once. It's never happened before. It'll never happen again. He is now contained. Everyone's safe again. But I do agree with you they brought up the missing people. And I think that the lack of experience for this type of crime there, I think this would have been labeled as a missing person, even with the torso washing up on shore. And
by
I think
the way,
they would have left it as that.
But Aurelio is putting up a graphic about the Danish disapproval of the Me Too movement. Why this matters is because this nation has a historical trend of silencing spaces for this kind of conversation. So if someone wants to be a feminist and someone wants to talk about gender violence and wants to talk about sexual assault and masculinity and machismo and things like that, there's not a space for that where it's welcome. There's not a space for that kind of equality or true equality, because it's not welcome. Sorry, go ahead.
They need this to go away. They need this to be about one crazy person, one isolated event, and so they don't have to get into the greater issue.
Right. They don't want to go deeper. And the reason why is this, in my perspective. You tell me, I have my idea. I want to hear what your idea is. My thought is immediately, they're not interested in looking in the mirror at themselves. So they deprive themselves of language. They deprive themselves of education. They deprive themselves of the context to allow for this discussion, because they know if they have it, a lot of people are going to have to change the way they behave. A lot of people are going to have to acknowledge their complicity in what's going on and how they have been working, how they really just completely kowtow to wealthy people, how wealthy people set the agenda, the narrative, and the culture, and everyone else is aspiring to be them. So if they do something like this, they're going to get a lot of slack for a long time, even in court, with whatever, with being able to say whatever they want. Imagine, do you think that if a black person abducted, raped, and murdered this white girl in Denmark, do you think we'd be having the same? Do you think the conversation would be a little different?
It'd be very different.
Would not be about how he was an evil genius or a mad scientist.
No, it would be about the color of his skin.
Or charismatic, right? What would it be about? Tell me.
The color of his skin. It would be based on solely the color of that offender's skin, and they would leave it at that, and it would just be like someone who came and did this terrible thing, but it would be based on race. That's where we wouldn't be talking about the rest.
No, we would be talking, right. We would be talking essentially about how it's normal in these other cultures for them to be violent. It's normal for people with darker or skin or from other countries to be violent sexual predators. We expect that.
Just like they did with talking about the countries, right? They're talking about the countries like that. And that's the angle it would have taken. It would have been like, this person came from one of these dangerous countries, came here to our perfect little bubble, did this horrible thing, but don't worry, it's gone now. There's nothing else to worry about.
Once you are able to see that narrative, it is very difficult to unsee, because the comparison that I make immediately is to North America, the United States, North America above Mexico. The United States and Canada have this problem. They don't believe, they don't want the people that are in the community that are white and middle class or upper, they don't want to believe that this is possible, except as a result of external influences like immigrants and people who are darker skinned and people who are from so-called violent or shithole countries. Not in the United States. We wouldn't do that. We wouldn't do that in Canada. We wouldn't do that in the United States. It's just these other people. We externalize it. And to the same extent, the same kinds of people do not want to have the conversation. They don't want the space for a Me Too conversation. They don't want to talk about gender violence. You talk to them about femicide, they act like that couldn't possibly happen unless it's among immigrants. And let me just put this is a really two things I want to point out. When people from the United States talk about people who enter the country that are not from America, from the United States, we call them immigrants, right? When Americans go and live in other countries, we call them expatriates. Why is that? And Europeans too. People who are darker skinned, who are darker than completely white, like someone like me, when they come to a Western country, they're called immigrants. When Western people go and live in Latin American countries or other or Asian countries where there's more poverty and their dollar goes further, they're called expatriates. It's very interesting. First, the second thing is the word to describe the culture that we are seeing here is machismo. It's a Latin American word for a Western phenomenon. It's a Western phenomenon that we've labeled with a Latin American term to make it seem like they're doing it more than we. They're just doing it more obvious than we are. What we've done is we've created, we do these things, but we create context where the conversation's not allowed, where the space isn't there and the language isn't there to have the conversations. And the women who are not stupid, these are not stupid women. They arrive at the right conclusion while ignoring all the facts in their context and suppressing their own trauma. You can see the trauma. Did you get that sense that these women were actually hurt? These women they understood the dangers of being among men, but they weren't willing to talk about it openly. Did you get that sense? I can feel it.
Yeah, I got that sense. The other sense I got from this documentary, talking about the conversations that are difficult to have amongst like the white community, for instance, transgender being one of them. And I can guarantee that anyone who sits down to watch this documentary who has those difficulties with those conversations is going to lose sight of everything as soon as that woman comes onto the screen. That then becomes the focus of, well, how can she have that job, and who is she, and what was she a man, was she? All of these conversations come up because they're uncomfortable and they aren't willing to see anything past that point either.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a really great anthropological study of a community that has really isolated itself and created this whole narrative, this whole fantasy narrative about safety and exceptionalism that they are unwilling to allow anything to penetrate at all. Anything that gets in the way of that, they work day and night to try to prove it wrong. Aurelio made a really good observation, which is that every time he came up with a new story, they would invest quite a bit of time, effort, energy, and money in trying to disprove that version, instead of explaining that, hey, you know what? You've lied 4 times. That is the evidence that you're lying now. We don't have a responsibility to take anything you say as being true, because you keep making shit up that's false. And after the second time, we don't need to keep going after this and trying to disprove your theory. You're just a liar. Now we know that.
That's right. But do you remember what they said about that? They said, well, it is legal to lie in court. So he was allowed to change it as often as I know.
Which is completely untrue. It's a crime to lie in court. You cannot lie. It's a crime. No. What it is, it's legal to lie in court if you have the resources and the attorneys to fight against the state. The state, what they're saying is, the state will allow you to lie and entertain your ideas so long as you have the resources to attack the state. If you do not have resources, privilege, agency, or the right color of skin or the right class, you are not going to be given that opportunity.
No,
nobody's going to tolerate that.
I was honestly a little surprised that they said it just like that. Like, he kept changing his story, but you are allowed to lie in court. It is legal to lie in court, is what the line was. I was like, why?
No, she said it is legal. You can go into court and you can make up as many stories.
You can lie
without any consequences. So every time he says something, we have an obligation to accept it as truth and see if it's not possible. And all I'm thinking is, what world do you live in? I don't believe that's true for a second for any court system that I'm aware of, that it's legal to go into court and say things that are false. What's real is that the judge and the prosecutor are solely responsible for deciding whether or not someone's lying and making either a criminal charge or giving a warning or making a legal, either filing legal charges related to false statements or making a legal ruling related to false statements. The prosecutor and the judge are solely responsible for that. And what they were saying is, in a case like this with a wealthy person, the person can lie and get away with it because there are no consequences, not like a regular person.
Now, going back to also what you asked before, if this offender happened to be a black male, how tolerant would they have been of him even changing his story once?
Not even one time. They wouldn't even wait.
He wouldn't even get to tell the story.
They would have arrested him at the dock, because the real and by the way, might not have actually happened, because I wonder if she would have actually gotten on the boat if he were black or brown or some other nationality. Because of her obvious racism, her racist content. Now, she's actually I want to just say this. She's written some great stories. And the thing that makes the stories interesting is her, because she is white and she is so privileged that her participation in a context where there's less privilege and more perceptual danger from the outside gaze is itself a form of sort of making this into entertainment. The notion of exotic, something being exotic. She went to exotic places and saw exotic things. Exotic to whom? Exotic to privileged people. So, the people who live there probably are thinking, yeah, this is where we live. What do you? Yeah, take pictures. This is where we live. This is our home. This is our city. This is, and so she's very good about that. But let's see. After the killing of Irish man, yes, but Denmark unaware of its gender violence problem, unaware of its racism. I would say the answer to that is no, it's not. It's not unaware of it, because it deprives its citizens of the context and language and spaces for these kinds of questions and conversations. Do you know what I mean? Tell me what you're thinking about that. Because as I'm seeing these people, all I'm seeing are people who are not in tune at all with these issues and don't even understand that in the rest of the world, this is very normal. And it's very normal in their world too. They just aren't seeing it. Talk to me about that. That to me was, it just repeatedly.
I honestly wasn't aware.
Blew me away.
That's right. Yeah, the tone deaf. That's what I was going to say. I was unaware. I'm not going to lie. I didn't know that they were restricted to that much information, that it was that baffling that this existed. Like, even this title right here, they're unaware of racism. Are you kidding me?
Well, here's the thing. Because anybody who has access to the internet has no excuse for not being aware of what's going on in the rest of the world.
Right.
However, in reality, most people get their idea of the world from their social media feed, which is curated towards their interests and their beliefs. Your social media feed is a reflection of what you are liking and not liking. So the more you like things that have a narrative that suppress certain views and suppress certain language, the less of that world you're going to see, and the more, flowers and roses that support your view you're going to see, and you're going to think that's the world. You are programming your social media to create a world that you will tolerate, that you think is acceptable.
Yeah.
And anything that's outside that narrative, you're going to think is fake, because it's not what you're seeing every day.
Right.
That's how I see it. So, and I will be very honest, when I started a long time ago, I wasn't aware of these problems either. I came at the problems for a personal reason, and my journey led me to here. But it's still a journey that's still evolving. I'm still aware that there's a bunch of shit I don't know and a bunch of context I don't understand. So I'm open to a lot of ideas and a lot of information. So my social media feeds, whether it's TikTok, Facebook, or Instagram, look very different than someone who lives in the United States in a place like, say, Kentucky, which, by the way, their social media feeds are probably very quiet right now, because what most people are not aware of is that Russian bots were responsible for most of the far right sites, chatter, memes, conversations, shit stirring that was going on in North America. And once Russia got taken off of the social media platforms, there's like an 80% reduction in that kind of content on social media now.
80%.
Yeah, it's almost gone. Because now people are like, where are all my people who support all my stuff? No, those were all Russian bots. Those were all fake accounts. Accounts supporting, and it's very obvious. Go ahead.
On that topic, I still sometimes I'm very surprised that people don't understand the internet. Like they believe that each post or each person or each account is a real person. This idea that there's like Russian bots, well, you're a conspiracy theorist to most of them. Like there's just this ignorance. It's frustrating.
So Aurelio's going to put on the screen real quick here. There's in the news over the last 10 years, ever since Trump got elected, because of Russian bots, Russian websites and Russian actors interfering with U.S. elections, not just in terms of technology at the technology level or with voting machines or anything like that. You don't need to do that. Mm-hmm. You just create websites that promote racist content or divisive content and polarize the U.S. And it takes a while to do, but it's classic misinformation campaign. How Russian troll farms. This is from, what year was this from, Aurelio? I can't read it. My eyes are.
It's from last year.
2020. Tons of Russian troll farms. Basically, a shit ton of cell phones, hundreds of cell phones connected with multiple accounts, where Republican people can buy influence with these farms, and then it changes everything. This has been going on for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And anyone who's in denial of this, who doesn't understand this, it's their lack of curiosity about the world around them is part of the problem. Their lack of interest is part of the problem. The information exists for you to check your sources, but they don't want to. When you find that something supports your ideas or supports your belief system, you don't want to change it. 140 million Americans a month on Facebook before the 2020 election. 140 million Americans influenced by this kind of stuff. That's a lot. That's like a quarter of the population or something like that. It was 360. I think it's more now, but yeah. Anyway, the point is, like you said, how many people do you know in your life that don't understand how the internet works, yet still believe everything they read that comes across their screen?
All of them.
Yeah.
Do you know how many times I've tried to have this conversation with multiple people that are in my life, and I usually get the, well, I saw it on the news.
No, you didn't.
Or I saw it on Facebook. It's so and so posted it. Okay, I can't. It's just I'm exhausted.
Me too, but you saw it. So one of the funny things that happened is Aurelio came over last night with Valeria, and we were going to watch this documentary. And I was telling Aurelio about the thing that was really embarrassing me yesterday was the fact that the White House gave briefings to 50 TikTokers, security briefings to 50 TikTokers, because of the fact that TikTokers are more influential than politicians or anybody else on the internet. They have more audience, they get a greater reach, they have better packaging of their message, and they're out there talking about the war in Ukraine in a very incompetent and negligent way. So they decided to give these guys security briefings. This is an admission that people with social media status, people with social media viewers who have no education, training, knowledge, ability, expertise, nothing, just have an audience that is staring at them, they have more credibility than anybody else. We are believing what we are seeing. And what was funny is Aurelio goes, that was real? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, that was on Saturday Night Live. I thought they were joking. They made a skit about it on Saturday Night Live. It's not a joke. We give more credibility to our celebrity, the people that are within our celebrity gaze, than we do to people who actually know what they're talking about. We give because they give us a narrative of the world that we like. They entertain us. They make us happy.
Right.
So
And they can get
tell me what you think about
information.
that, because man, that blew me away this week. I couldn't believe that that had to happen.
This is well, I didn't know about that specifically, but talking about what people are believing on TikTok, like that source that they're following, for whatever reason they like them. Yes, their narrative supports theirs, right? Their bias is probably the same. Everything's in line. But that person that is putting it on TikTok could get that information. They could write that information and send it, and then a whole bunch of people are now regurgitating this information that is bullshit and believing it thoroughly. And this is dangerous. This actually really concerns me, that everyone just thinks that everything that is online is accurate, and they believe it with all of their soul, that everything is accurate. No matter what the narrative is, they're right, and that's it. Terrifying.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. The problem is gullibility, and bias, our willingness to believe things that fit our narrative. So So this is a real thing. This is a real thing that had to happen. And by the way, I'm sitting here unbelievably thinking, yeah, they had to do it because the TikTok influencers are actually giving bad information and they're reaching more people. So this is probably, in this weird post-apocalyptic world, this is actually responsible. This is actually a version of being responsible. And that's how stupid, how ignorant, and how susceptible to misinformation the American public is. There's no other way of putting it. That we need to brief our TikTokers, because basically the news sources are not giving them exactly what they want, or they're getting more news from that. It's very bad. Very, very bad.
I can't even believe that that's where we are.
That's where we are. But what it really is the death of the expert. It's the denial of the expert as a source of information, and which experts have done to themselves, by the way. So the influencer army, there we go, to fight vaccine lies. This is not limited to Ukraine. It's other areas of social problems, other areas. Even the pandemic, false information is sold and repackaged, and money's being made from it. So,
but that has taken a huge dip too. Like on TikTok, that used to be all you would see is the sides fighting for their beliefs in the pandemic and the vaccinations, and now that's gone.
Why?
It's like
because
one
Russia
or two
is no
videos
longer on social media. With Russia gone from social media, those voices no longer exist. And by the way, those crazy, insane voices were the only ones that most Republican senators are listening to, because they think that's their base. That's who they were pandering to when they helped get Trump elected and when they were trying to keep Trump in power. And now they're starting to have to face the realization is the people in the United States were not thinking like that. The people in the United States don't have those extreme beliefs. Only a few do. So you have to go seek them out and put them on TV as though they're representative. Most of the division, most of the ideas of division and hostility and the people trying to be clever and sarcastic, most of that trolling was coming from Russian troll farms. and we fall for it every time, every single time. But that's because of the problems that we've created, of the way that we've walled ourselves off from reality. And that's why I say this documentary is an excellent anthropological study in what happens to a culture and how it puts it exposes its neck for every threat possible by ignoring and denying the reality of gender violence, of femicide, and of the actual what violence is and who we tolerate it from. All right? What violence really is and who we are willing to tolerate it from. The racism of this culture is on full display. The gender disparities and the gender violence are on full display. And the desire to control the narrative by denying language and access and to externalize the problem as dark, black, and of the other is not hidden at all in this documentary. I am amazed at how they can speak about it, recognize it, but at the same time, deny it. Deny that it's happening right in front of them. Like I said, the only person who gets it is the the transgender submarine commander. She's amazing, and she gets it so quickly and so easily, and without any problems.
You know, though, the unfortunate realization I have when we talk about things like this is people are going to go and watch this, and they're not going to see any of it, even though we just described it. They'll be like, "No, I don't see it. It seems accurate." They're not going to see those issues.
They're not. No. That's Aurelio's argument is this is a very dangerous film because anybody watching it will think that, oh, we've just seen something and we've been informed. But you have to step back and look at this from a meta point of view. The other thing that is very telling is how every single person who is interviewed believes that they are part of some type of movie or show or experience in the world at which they are the center. So everything that they are experiencing is without empathy for anyone else. It's only their experience that matters. They're seeing the murder of their friend, but only through their own feelings.
How it made them feel. Yeah.
How does it impact them and their lives? Even the guy who's the biographer of this mad scientist, we'll call him because that's the media's name for him. He's not. He's a fucking, he's a murderer. he's a man who targeted females for sexual violence and murder. All right, that's what he was. He wasn't a mad scientist. But even the biographer of this guy, basically his whole struggle about this, his whole conversation is about how this is going to make him look to the world.
That's right. He said, should I feel bad that I created this book and writing about this guy in this particular image? And then he was like, or he offered me a second book deal. Like he was torn between how it was going to affect him.
Should I take the money? Should I keep calling him in prison and interviewing in prison and writing him and getting, should I keep doing that and getting attention or not?
Yes. Well, you know what's funny?
Dilemma.
The first few letters, he said they were very short. I was very disturbed by what I saw. And then as it goes through and he's considering, I would say, this other book, the letters that he wrote get longer as well. So he's engaging, right? He's looking for the silver lining in his career for what this is going to do for him.
But the other thing was the search and rescue team, everybody, when they're talking about this case, they're actually, other than when the women are right up against their trauma and having to identify real danger, gender violence and trauma, they get very upset. You can see they're repressing their trauma. But when it comes to talking about the details of her death and her body and what was done to it, they are all smiling, giggling, and happy. In fact, they even say when we found the head, we knew it was going to be a good day. It was going to be great. And the guy who's like the guy who's the current examiner, I knew, man, the sigh of relief, the expression of joy that we felt for finding the head, it was probably heard throughout the country. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, what in the fuck are you talking about? This is a dead woman we're talking about. This is not a time for happiness. This is not a time for glibness or for excitement. Yet you are like a little child who now gets to be the center of attention because what you found. Everybody's clamoring to either make themselves the center of attention or clamoring to keep the attention because they believe they are the center. That was my take on that. Tell me what you were thinking about those different expressions.
Twofold.
As you were thinking.
Yeah, twofold. I got that sense that they were excited that that this was a good day and they're going to be the center of attention. And then I also got the impression that they want this investigation to be over with to get this to go away so they can go back to their bubble of not worrying.
There you go. Exactly. Now that we've identified this and we put him in the box of being a psychopath. Okay, good. Now we put the psychopath in the box. He's in the prison. Society is fine now. We don't have to keep talking about this because this was just an anomaly. This man is a glitch. Everyone out there are no institutions that create gender violence. There are no people that engage in gender violence. There's no problem with social classes where the wealthy are given special privilege to do whatever they want. And, everything is fine. So now we got this guy, except for, he did escape. He did trick a guard with a fake whatever.
Except for when he
right away, their prison system is so bad that their guards are so dumb that they're that easy to be tricked. And he escaped. But the other thing was they had snipers all around him when he escaped and when they captured him. Do you think that if a person of color had escaped, do you think those snipers would be waiting to pull the trigger?
No. Did you see? They were all just circled around him and the dog and everything. They were all just watching him. Like, what is he going to do?
Yeah, well, he's not armed. What are they going to do? We thought he might have a bomb. No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Yeah,
think that.
no.
There's no
you were just letting He was taking a break. Okay, he deserved a break
Taking a rest. He was just
outside,
sitting there.
fresh air.
Jesus.
Just needed a break. But
The
no,
amount of
if it was
time it would
anybody
take-
else,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, they'd be dead. Exactly right. But
no,
the
they'd
amount
be
of- there
dead
we
a
go.
long time.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
There he is.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank
So the
you.
amount of time it would take to pull all these cars around and get these multiple snipers into position, it's like 15 minutes. It would take that time. So he has that time that they're sitting there about it. This is all theater because there's no chance they're going to shoot this guy. There's no plan to actually sick the dogs up. The dog is sitting there with the sniper, like, let me know what to do. If this were a black person, they'd already have sicked him on him because the German Shepherd is designed to do that. Sorry, go ahead.
If that was a black male, like we said before, they would have unloaded a clip into his back a long time ago. There would have been none of this.
And the dogs would not be on leashes. The dogs would be going, right?
No, they'd be gone. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
everyone just sat around.
So I'm going to say this. I recommend this documentary, but it needs to be made very clear that I'm not recommending it because I think it shows this heroic effort with where justice was achieved. It demonstrates a system, a culture of people and a system of justice that absolutely does not see the gender perspective, doesn't see gender violence, does not understand does not understand the danger that classism represents and the necropolitical implications of allowing people who are wealthy to get away with things that are essentially crimes right in front of us, to treat other people badly, to sexually harass people, to curate vulnerable persons around them to be exploited, as though this is okay. And the reason why we allow this is because we want to do that too. We believe that we want to get to the place where we don't have to talk about Me Too. We don't have to talk about gender violence. We don't have to talk about sexual harassment or sexual exploitation. We don't want to talk about these problems. We want to benefit from them. We want to benefit from these structures. We want to be that wealthy person in the submarine with the female who can't say no, who is completely under our control. Think about what he spent his time doing and what he did and what his goal was. And he is living that dream of class and privilege in this context. He targeted her. He decided who he could kill, what the consequences might be. And he did it because he thought he could get away with it. And he didn't bother staging it that competently because he didn't think anyone would look. And he was almost right. He was like this close to being right. If it hadn't been for the transgender submarine detective, the ex-commander.
Right. There would have been nothing. Even with the pictures of her going down in the submarine with him it'd be left. That'd be it.
It'd just be a mystery now. Like it would be like Epstein here in the United States over and over and over again until it becomes unbearable, until there's so many bodies stacked up or so many victims stacked up, you can't ignore it anymore. I mean, we have this problem with our former president, Trump. We had this problem with Bill Cosby. We had this problem with people like, what's his name? Other people that are wealthy that have done similar terrible, terrible things from positions of privilege. We just accept it as though that's something that we have to tolerate to get the benefit of the classism we all want to participate in.
Right.
Anyway, give me your final thoughts. Would you recommend somebody watch this? And if you do, what would you tell them?
I would recommend that they watch it, of course, but based on the conversations I've had with most of the people I'm going to recommend this to, they're still not going to see it. It's just going to be something that is, oh, that's so horrible. That's what I'm going to hear. But there's going to be nothing else. No, they're not going to see it.
People have seen the meta view of how this represents a culture that has walled itself off from knowledge, from basic knowledge, information, and the reality of human suffering. And their own complicity in it. They cannot reconcile their own complicity or see their own complicity in this violence.
And I don't like that I have to say that. I just feel that's how it would be. That is the truth about people who are going to watch it.
Yeah. So what I would say is maybe we should come up with a series of questions to ask, because I want people to see this, but I want them to.
That's a good idea.
I want them to see it, but I want them to ask the right questions. Because if you ask the right questions, the whole tapestry comes falling down, and you can see the wizard behind the man behind the curtain moving things.
I like that idea.
Yeah, it's a series of questions. Here are the questions. I might assign this for one of the classes and see if they'll do well. I'm gonna think about it.
That's a good idea, because going into it looking for, like, if you're looking for answers of something, it's going to force you to see a different perspective. Hopefully.
You hope. But what it comes down to is empathy. Ask yourself questions like, how comfortable are the women who are being interviewed? What is their, forget what they're saying. How comfortable are they answering questions? They're not comfortable. Why is that? What story is not being, what?
Just the way they're sitting. They're just so uncomfortable.
Yeah. And you could see like the friend, the one who's the friend, she's the one that's most traumatized. And she's like, yeah, I would still do it because I'm expected to. I'd still get in the submarine. That's what you're expecting. When you're a woman and it's a wealthy man, you have to get in the submarine. That's her explanation. You have to. I'm a woman. He's a wealthy man.
Yep.
Oh, that was the other thing. The other narrative was she did everything right. Everything right means she didn't get in the submarine with a black person or some dangerous person or some other person. She followed really good protocols when it was safe. And that's the problem. There is no context in which it's safe. That's the danger here. People believe that there are contexts in which they are immune to this kind of violence and where they're safe. Even when they're having their rights and when the danger is right in front of them, they can't see it when it's masked by wealth, privilege, and skin color. They can't see it.
Yeah.
That's what we're blind to. So the questions, I think, have to be about revealing that.
I think you're right.
All right, I think we're going to leave it there for this week. Thanks for joining me and then joining Melanie as well on The Hard Truth. We are going to have this will be available everywhere podcasts. You can go where podcasts are available, like Spotify and YouTube. So if you have any questions or want to reach out to us on this issue, or if you watch this program, this documentary, and you have a completely different perspective and you think that we're completely crazy, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
We would love that discussion. All right. Until next time, thank you very much. This has been The Hard Truth.